Ava.
I gave a heavy sigh as I put my plasma rifle back into its locker in my cabin. It had been a long shift, with various crew members up in arms about the supposed preferential treatment that Alex had been given, along with a rumor even being started that he was the reason that the pirates attacked in the first place. It was a ridiculous proposition to even talk about, and it didn't help that the Yaleans on the crew were egging them on. When I had walked in on them, they were even going as far as coming up with plans to catch Alex outside of his armor to take care of him. It was ironic, though, because the security team never would have found out about this rumor and dangerous behavior without Alex being on the cameras and monitoring the situation as it unfolded. Putting him in that position was already paying dividends, it seemed. I tossed my communicator on the desk and laid down heavily on the bed, waiting for sleep to finally take me after the long and arduous day that I had had. I could feel myself drifting off when my communicator alerted me of an incoming message. Groaning loudly, I got out of bed and plodded over to the desk. I snatched it up, trying to not scratch anything with my claws as I typed in the password and scrolled to the messages. I blinked in surprise as I saw an official statement from the Koshole hegemony. Due to the unprecedented circumstances of the last 2 days, the Koshole hegemony has come forward to denounce the warmongering of the Yalean conclave and reaffirm our belief of peace across the stars. The Koshole hegemony also recognizes the efforts of United Terra and their right to present themselves to the galaxy how they see fit. I blinked in surprise as read the simple message repeatedly, before finally sighing in relief. Perhaps Terrans could be seen again in our territories. That won't be the case with a lot of the species in the community, but it's a start. Maybe they might even settle on a planet. I suddenly froze when I realized that I had never asked Alex if the Terrans had a home planet. I suppose I'll ask him when I see him next, but with the job on the bridge, I would imagine it would be difficult to get a hold of him. I internally debated for a moment before ultimately deciding that sleep was far more important than finding out what the tiny Terran is doing right at this moment. I set my communicator back down and went to lay back in bed. Before I could even attempt to close my eyes, my communicator went off again. I hissed in irritation as I got back up and opened the message, not even bothering to see who it was from. "Hey, sorry to bother you, but could you do me a favor and come up to the bridge? It's kind of important." I blinked for a moment, processing the message, before finally realizing that it had come from Alex. "Why, what happened? It's best that you come and see for yourself. And besides, I don't feel like I could adequately tell you what's going on." I rolled my eyes. Always secrets with the Terrans. You'd think they'd try to be as open as possible now, but no, they still must be as cryptic as they have always been. "Fine, I'm coming up. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Thank you. And by the way, good job on busting that murder planning party earlier today. You did a rather good job at it." "Thanks." I looked over at my rifle, contemplating if I should take it with me, before ultimately deciding against it. Whatever Alex had gotten himself into, he could probably talk himself out of it. I gave another heavy sigh as I made my way over to the bridge. I couldn't help but overhear the other crew members gossiping about the murder planning party, as Alex had put it, that I and the security team had broken up. There was still a lot of speculation on how that whole situation played out, because the team is trying to keep a tight leash on the whole thing. I'm sure that the captain will announce it or something like that, keep people from guessing too much. I blinked as I reached the elevator, not even realizing that I had made it this far without paying attention. I shook my head and called the elevator. I really need to sleep if I'm spacing out this much just from walking for no less than 10 minutes. I finally got to the bridge, and as the doors opened, I noticed that it was significantly less chaotic than the last time that I was here. People were at their stations and performing their jobs admirably. I'm sure that it helped that there was no pirate attack that would cause people to fly into a panic. There was a circle of influence around where Alex was stationed where everyone was not doing anything except staring at the Terran with a concerned look on their faces. I gave a deferential nod to the captain as I walked over to Alex. My eyes were immediately drawn to the many modifications that he had made in the short period of time that I hadn't seen him, including a motor of some kind rigged up to the wheelchair itself, and he had a new chest plate for his armor. I could immediately tell that it's new because it was the signature color of the fabricators on the ship, as opposed to the gunmetal gray that the rest of the mech was. He didn't react at all to me coming near him, and the left index finger of the mech was plugged into the data port. "Hey, Alex, I'm here. What do you need my help with?" I asked, concern starting to mount. He didn't respond for a moment, so I put my hand on his shoulder. "Alex?" I turned to Iskander, who was sitting next to him and staring at him concerned. "What happened?" She shook her head. I wish that I knew, but one moment he was acting normal and moving, and as he was going to disconnect the mech thing from the camera systems, he froze up and won't respond to anything. I turned back to Alex. "Alex, can you hear me? Give me a sign that you're alive in there, otherwise we're going to have to cut you out of it," I shouted, where the ear would be on a person. I felt a buzz from my communicator. I looked down at it to see that there was a video call request from him. I accepted it, only to be greeted by a pitch-black screen. "Hey, sorry that you can't see me, but I seem to have had a bit of technical difficulties right now," he said, not clearing anything up at all. "And what in all of the stars in the galaxy is that supposed to mean?" I asked. "Well, as I've said before, I'm not really that good of an engineer. I just know what buttons to push to pull up the diagnostic system. But what I think happened was that plugging into the ship's systems for so long either drained my batteries all the way, or the mech decided to kill itself after having to deal with an operating system that it was never designed to interact with in any way. Long story short, I don't have the ability to move the mech to somewhere else right now, nor do I have power." "Well, can't you call someone to get some help on it?" I asked. "Well, under normal circumstances, I'd have access to a whole host of things that I can use to troubleshoot this piece of shit, but the closest quantum communicator that I have that isn't here is back in my cabin." "Well, can you at least get out, or are you stuck in there?" "As it stands, I think I am pretty thoroughly stuck, but there are a lot of escape hatches that I can use to get out of here, so I'm not in danger of starving or anything like that." "Well, then get out of it!" I almost shouted. "All right, you don't have to shout at me," he said back as he hung up the call. It was only a few moments later when I saw a tiny hatch open at the very top of the head, and Alex crawled out of it. He dusted himself off and looked up at me. "I feel like if things keep going the way that they have been, we'll be seeing each other moments after my mech craps out once every 2 days or so."
Alex. I looked between Ava and Iskander as they both stared blankly at me. "What? Am I not allowed to make observations about the way things are going?" Iskander ignored me in favor of talking to Ava. "You know, when I saw the pictures the others showed me of Alex, I thought that they were exaggerating the size aspect of him." She looked at me a little closer. "He's much smaller than I expected." "Yeah, well, we can't all exactly be goddamn kaiju fucking 60 feet tall and shit now, can we?" I spat back. "It's also kind of rude to talk about someone when they're standing right in front of you." They both turned to look at me. "You're lucky that Eva's as nice as she is. Otherwise, I don't think that she'd put up with you right now." "Yeah, Alex, do you know how many favors I've done for you in the past 2 days?" Ava asked. I started to get a bit impatient. "Yeah, well, as much as I'm a man that keeps track of his debts, I'd have to admit that my ledger has gotten a bit full as of lately." I scratched the back of my head as I started to mumble. "Mostly by you, but we don't have to get into that." She loomed her head closer. "Sorry, what was that? I couldn't hear you." I gave a sigh. Yeah, I owe you a lot for the last 2 days. Can we just get going?" She belted out a laugh. "Yeah, we can get going." She put her arm out for me to climb it once again. "What are you going to do with that?" she asked, gesturing to the mech. "Well, I would prefer to take it back to my cabin so that I can plug it in and run the diagnostic program that I have on the computers back there, but that all hinges on this," I said, while pointing to the mech's finger that was still firmly stuck in the data port. "I'd like to get that out before I leave because that is a major intelligence leak that's already leaked way too much information. I fear that if I don't stop being such a big liability, they're not even going to bother killing me quickly." Ava looked at me funny. "Do Terrans kill other Terrans for things like this often?" "Oh, absolutely. There's even an entire portion of our history called the Cold War where people got killed for less all the time. The keeping of such a large and important secret as this," I gestured to myself, and then the mech. Required certain draconian methods to make a comeback as we couldn't risk our secrets spilling even a bit. I turned back to the finger stuck in the data port before pulling out my pad for the user manual. At least this was digitized. I did a keyword search for the datajack section. After a quick browsing through the section, I finally came to what I was looking for, the manual ejection of the datajack. Okay, so I figured it out. Give me a second to get it released so you can just pull the chair back and we can be on our way, I said, starting to climb down the mech and onto the arm. So we're just going to gloss over the fact that you may be killed by your government? I'm sure the hegemony would be more than willing to give you shelter so that you won't be killed by your own people. I waved my hand dismissively. Nah, I don't want to do that because when I do, they'll absolutely take me for a deserter and send a cleanup crew after me. Unless your government has top-notch security, I doubt that they can do anything to stop the cleanup crew they'd send my way. There's got to be a way to keep you safe. It doesn't feel right leading you to your death. Iskender, back me up here, Ava cried in horror. I'm with Ava on this one, Alex, Iskender said, getting closer. After what you've done for this ship, I don't think anyone would be comfortable with us shepherding you to what is most likely going to be your death. That comment gave me pause. These people actually care. I stared at the two of them for long enough that Ava finally said something. What are you staring at us for? She asked. Well, most Terrans you meet either don't care about you or are pretending long enough to screw you over in one way or another. I thought for a moment before continuing. I suppose you guys are a good change of pace. The silence was starting to become awkward, so I decided to crack a joke. And besides, I'm more likely going to be thrown in a jail cell for the rest of my life anyways. It was their turn to look at me as if I had just blown open their perception of the galaxy. You Terrans continue to be an enigma, but not in a way that is good, Eva finally said. Back on this train, huh? Yeah, us Terrans suck pretty hardcore. Now come on, we have a mech to move, I said, completely ruining the moment. Ava nodded and grabbed the shoulders of the mech. So, in theory, I started, looking at the user manual, I can pop open a maintenance hatch on the hand and manually disengage the lock system for the data jack, but you'll have to pull the whole thing out so that I can deal with this later. I chuckled. It's actually pretty cool, because the locking system to make sure that it doesn't disengage when you don't want it to be is just a simple system like a deadlock on a door. So long as the emergency motor for that shit isn't also down, it should be an easy process, I explained as I got to the access panel located on the back of the mech's hand. I don't know who you're explaining this to, Alex. You're speaking to the head of engineering on this ship. I know how a data jack works, Iskender said, sounding a little offended that I had explained that to her. Well, I don't know what you all teach your kids in those Xeno schools of yours, I shouted back as I finally got the deadlock removed. All right, it should be ready to go, I shouted over my shoulder to Ava, who was ready to start pulling as I braced for the sudden change in velocity. I thought I was prepared for it, what with my experience with mechs in the past and my unhealthy love for all things adrenaline, but I miscalculated one thing. I wasn't strapped into a harness of any kind. I didn't have any fall protection, and I wasn't even grabbing onto the access panel very tightly to begin with. I'm sure that you can imagine my surprise when I felt my grip on the panel slip. Before I could react, I felt my body in a free fall, tumbling uncontrollably to the floor 40 feet below me. I felt the world slow before me, and my breath caught. So this is it, I thought to myself. If only my mom could see me now. She always thought that me getting up to this kind of shit was going to lead to my death. I realized that I should have started to panic at this point, but I work in security. Not coming home is one of the many uncertainties that's included in the job description. I closed my eyes and prepared for the end, or as much as one can prepare when they're going to have all their bones broken in a couple of seconds. I suddenly felt something under me, breaking my fall far sooner than I was expecting. I felt around, feeling soft, warm fur instead of the cold, hard, unyielding metal floor. I opened my eyes to see Iskender gently holding me in one of her hands. Are you okay? She asked, her face looming over me. I just sat there and breathed for a moment, propping myself onto my elbows. Holy shit, you just saved my life, I breathed. I'm fine, though. She let out a sigh of relief as she put me back onto the shoulder of the mech. Think nothing of it. Consider this a repayment for driving off those pirates. I nodded, still weak in the legs and breathing hard from my brush with death. All right then, remind me to get a parachute fabricated for another situation like this.